There is something timeless about the idea that when ownership is direct, things just work better. For example, think about a small family run restaurant. When the owner is behind the counter, greeting customers, tasting the food, adjusting the recipes, it thrives. The energy is different. Every flaw gets fixed quickly because it's their name, their money, their pride on the line. But flip that around. The moment that same restaurant becomes a soulless chain managed by some regional director hundreds of miles away, the food slips, the service dulls, and suddenly no one really cares. Profit becomes a spreadsheet entry, not a mission. It's the same story scaled up to entire governments. When politicians stop being hands on stewards and start acting like distant shareholders, the system begins to rot. Decisions get outsourced to consultants, lobbyists, advisors, and before long, the people actually running the show aren't the ones who were elected. They are the ones who found ways to profit off the lack of attention. And the public usually doesn't notice. The media covers outrage, and it has outrage after outrage in fast bursts, but then moves on. People scroll past, sigh, and forget it. It's like a revolving door of scandals, each one blurring into the next. So when no one is minding the store, those with access quietly rewrite the rules in their favor. You get policies written by industry lawyers, candidates handpicked by wealthy donors, campaign financed by the very entities they are supposed to regulate. This is not just the story of the United States, but it's the story everywhere. You can see this pattern everywhere from Washington to Westminster. The results are eerily similar. Growing inequality, tax codes that reward the top 1%, and a middle class losing faith in fairness altogether. Every election cycle, voters are promised reform, but what they get is a slicker version of the same deal. But when faith breaks, when people start to believe the system itself cannot deliver, something dangerous happens. Out of the frustration comes the search for a strong man, a supposed outsider, someone to shake things up. History shows this never ends neatly. These drastic figures usually break more than they can fix. The saddest part is the long arc of the consequence. When all this political theater plays out, there's an entire generation of children who are growing up in a world less fair, less open, with fewer chances to move upward than their parents had. What gets lost is not just trust, but the opportunity itself. At the core, it comes back to that simple truth. Things work best when those in charge actually own the outcomes. Whether it's a shop or a company or a country, direct accountability is what keeps it alive. Now, coming to the recent election of Zohran Mamdani as New York City's mayor, this is a vivid commentary or illustration of the narrative about ownership and accountability in governance. Mamdani, a democratic socialist and state assembly member, won the mayoral election on a platform centered around affordability and people-oriented policies, decisively defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Republican Curtis Sliwa. His victory marks a historic shift. He becomes the youngest and first Muslim mayor in a century, signaling the desire among New Yorkers for authentic representation and change after years of political turmoil and scandals. The backdrop to Mamdani's race was incumbent Mayor Eric Adams' troubled tenure. Adams, initially seeking re-election, withdrew his campaign amid scandals, declining poll numbers, and a lack of visible public support. His administration, weakened by federal investigations which were later dismissed, ceded space for Mamdani's insurgent campaign, promising accountability and direct leadership for the people. Adams' departure underlined the risk when ownership here in political leadership is weakened or distracted, creating opportunities for people to push for real change or alternatively for self-interested actors to exploit weaknesses. This election encapsulates the broader dilemma facing modern democracies. When politicians prioritize personal or special interest gains, as Adams' controversies and Cuomo's political maneuvering suggested, governance falters. Public trust erodes and democratic institutions are strained. Media cycles can magnify scandals quickly, but just as quickly move on to the next scandal, shortening the public memory and reducing pressure for sustained accountability. Meanwhile, Voter frustration grows, fueling the demand for leaders like Mamdani, who promise to own the outcomes and genuinely work for everyday citizens rather than powerful donors or entrenched elites. Mamdani's win thus reflects the democratic test today. People still want democracy, but they want it to be genuine, rooted in accountable leadership that tackles inequality and protects opportunities, especially in a place as costly and complex as New York. His platform resonates as an act of reclaiming ownership of governance, countering decades of absentee stewardship or corruption that has often skewed policies towards the wealthy and politically connected. Yet, the path forward remains challenging, as systemic rigging of institutions and deep frustration could also invite reactionary responses if trust does not continually get rebuilt. In short, the 2025 New York mayoral election is a microcosm of the larger narrative. Direct, accountable ownership produces a flourishing enterprise. In this case, government without it, exploitation fills the void, and democracy itself faces a perilous reckoning. Mamdani's victory is a hopeful but hard-won step towards restoring that ownership on behalf of all New Yorkers and a younger generation demanding a fairer future. Now, the big question is whether the big promises made can actually be delivered on. If not, how deep and strong will the public outrage be, and whether democracy can survive that rage? If you look back to all the winning candidates, they all made big promises. The people believe the promise and elect the leader, and then it's all up to how they deliver. So one hopes that Mamdani would be able to deliver, but the promises he made are quite hard, and the entrenched institutions and vested interests are not going to let go that easily. So watch the space. Please let me know what you think. Bye for now.